Welcome to another episode of Highlights. In this week's episode, we will be talking about a mask from the Mossi culture, and the book we'll be discussing is The Deep by Rivers Solomon. Let's go ahead and get started. So the mask we have to talk about today is from the Mossi culture, and they can be found in Burkina Faso. These masks are a part of a funerary masquerade tradition. Figures in this culture are used by the ruling class, and masks are used by the conquered people to honor the spirits of the wilderness and control the forces of nature. Each family would refer to an appropriate myth explaining the mask's origin. The mask made an appearance several times throughout the year. It's used to escort the dead to the world beyond. It's used for sacrifices to ensure good crops and to supervise during first harvest. Between appearances, the masks remain on the family shrine. So the reason I chose this mask for this week is that it's used in funerary processions and kind of like pivotal seasonal moments of the year, if you will. I felt like that had a lot to do with the book that I wanted to discuss today. And the book that I want to talk about is called The Deep by Rivers Solomon. There's also 3 other accredited authors as well: David Diggs, William Hudson, and Jonathan Snipes, because I think part of the theme for the book was based off of a song that I think these 3 men wrote. Basically, the plot for the book is, it's really creative. It's about a culture of mermaids that are descendants of pregnant slaves that were thrown overboard on their way to America. That's probably the most imaginative story plot that I heard of yet. And while I feel like the book talked about a lot of important themes in society, I feel like it kind of fell short as far as enjoyment level. And what I mean by that is that the kind of plot for the book was so exciting that the actual story fell short for me in a way. It's a very short book, so I will recommend it based on that. Like, if you don't read a lot of long books and you want something short, this is great for that. However, I feel like there was so much left unsaid because it was such a short story, that the kind of universe that it sort of creates for you was maybe only about like 5% discovered, in my opinion. I just wish it could have been longer. I was expecting more fantasy, and I know you're probably thinking, well, I don't know how much more fantastical you can get. It's about mermaids, but like I said, this is just my opinion. That in no way means that I think it was a bad book, because like I said, the themes discussed were very important, and I thought it was very clever the way that they were discussed. But as far as just like base story enjoyment, I didn't really like it that much. But anyways, I digress. Let's go ahead and actually talk about it in detail. The story follows basically a main character, and I can't remember their name, but basically it's this main character's role to be the historian. And what that job in this culture of mermaids means is that the historian is responsible for holding all of the history and memories of the entire culture for everyone else. Because basically the whole thing is that the memory of these mermaid descendants of slaves is so painful that they only take a few days out of the year to really feel their feelings and remember these painful things from history. The book discusses themes of shared trauma, complacency, and coping mechanisms. It discusses transgenerational and intergenerational trauma, basically a psychological term which asserts that trauma can be transferred in between generations. So like I said, this is a very real thing that's kind of discussed in society. People of ethnicities that have been through really traumatic things in history, i.e. Black people, Jewish people, you could say like the Vietnamese during the Vietnam War. When something terrible happens within a culture that's like mass, felt in mass, then that trauma is then passed down through generations. So that's essentially what's happening in this book. Is, like I said, all of the mermaids are descendants of pregnant slaves who were thrown overboard. So that's something that's very traumatic for them. At a certain point in the story, it discusses the first, like basically the founder, their memories, and how they basically roamed the ocean lonely until they discovered others like them, and then they kind of created a plan to produce as much as possible so that they can keep themselves going. Everything that happens in the book is essentially a metaphor for what's happened in real life within Black culture, and then, like I said, other people of color within other ethnicities, or like religious sects. The ideas of complacency that the novel discusses is that, you know, they've all become comfortable depending upon one person to house all of these awful memories. I keep saying they because another theme in the book that's discussed is that the mer people, they don't have gender. Each person doesn't really have male and female roles per se, and each mermaid has male and female organs. So they're hermaphrodites, which I guess makes sense because there are a lot of fish that are hermaphrodites. Other important things that are discussed in this book is like the idea of the individual, in that what's more important, a person as an individual or who they are to their culture as a whole. It also asks questions about tradition. Are traditions do or die, or can we take stride and realize when and how some things are meant to be changed? All of these opinions that I'm saying are opinions, and I'm really not trying to offend anybody. I try to remain as neutral as possible, so if I slip up and say something wrong, I'm sorry. I didn't intend to. It was not with malice. So yeah, I think it's an important story about trauma, about mental health, self-care, and those are all things that are really relevant today. So like I said, I still recommend that you check it out if you get a chance. It was really creative, so I won't knock that. I'm just, like I said, again, personally, I just wish there could have been more, but it's definitely worth reading. I think that's all I have to say. I'm sorry I struggled a bit through that, but like I said, I tried really hard. It's hard to talk about hard topics, but it's important that we talk about them. So that was me making an effort. I hope you guys have a great weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye.